against religious minorities, to all kinds of things. So there is a strong interlinkage, and you really have to address both together, separately but together, I would feel. Why the IMF staff has different ideas, yes, and some of their research is fantastic. Some of their research, it recognizes market failures, it recognizes that capital accounts you shouldn't have free capital accounts, they're problematic. It does all kinds of very interesting research. And I found the IMF staff are also very open to new ideas. They actually asked me for an article on what is wrong with economics. And I basically sat down and wrote a rant, and I was very surprised when they published it without any changes. But that is one level of how the IMF functions. And even the leadership, we have seen Kristalina Georgieva and Gita Gopinath being very sensible often about many issues, including about debt and the need for counter-cyclical policies and all of that. That has not permeated to the ground. And let me be honest, I don't think it will permeate into the programs. It will not lead to a change in the programs because that is not in the interests of the major shareholders of the IMF. I mean, Martin has told you about it. It's the US, it's Europe, it's Japan, and it's not just these governments. It is these governments representing their financial interests. So they want to turn the screws. They want to make sure they extract every little bit of profit from this relationship, and it doesn't matter what happens to those societies and economies. So it's a very different process in terms of the actual functioning of the IMF, in terms of the programming. People can often get confused because you look at the IMF research, you look at even some of the blogs, they're very open, they're very sensible, they make a lot of sense. But the actual programming, unfortunately, remains very, very rigid. And you are experiencing that in Sri Lanka. But I can tell you, there are, I think Isabel Ortiz has done this research, there are 152 countries which are doing IMF-style austerity. And not all of them even have IMF programs. But they have IMF local offices that are telling them this is what you should do. This is how you need to attract investors and make them confident, and this is what you need to be functioning in the global capital markets, and so on. So there is a real problem there. I just want to make a final point, which is related to all of this, that we are always told that, we can't do this because of the rule-based international order. For example, saying, we won't take up any more of these sovereign bonds and so on. And Martin, I think, did you mention how Argentina did very well in the period when it was out of the capital markets? It really did very well, okay? And that is something that I think most of our countries, we still haven't realized. The rules-based economic order has gone. It's a free-for-all, it's a jungle out there. The United States is so terrified of China overtaking it that it has completely destroyed the rule book. It does industrial policy when it wants, it does trade policy when it wants, it does subsidies when it wants. All of that has gone. Similarly with Europe. So the rules-based order is only for us, because we're stupid enough to go along with it. We have to recognize that they are not, in fact, involving the rules-based economic order. In fact, let me give you an example in finance. When there was a major run on Silicon Valley Bank, small bank in the US, and then subsequently in Syndicate Bank. These are small banks that lend to large, mainly software and IT companies and so on. They were so worried about it being a systemic threat that they pulled out all the stops, and within 3 days, within 3 days, the US government the Treasury had effectively given a guarantee which is against the rules. You're not supposed to give a guarantee on deposits that are beyond $250,000. They were giving guarantee on all deposits just to keep that bank afloat. The rules had gone. There was no problem. When Credit Suisse faced a problem in Geneva, over a weekend, they sat up at night and they did a major change in which Credit Suisse was absorbed into the other big Swiss bank, UBS. But again, on terms that completely tore up the rule book. So that the earlier notion of seniority, who is getting the shares, what will be the return they get, what will be the new value of that, all of that went by the road. And they not only tore up their own rule book, they tore up their own laws. Switzerland, with the complete acquiescence of the other rich countries. So, we have to stop start saying, okay, in this world, how do we now negotiate it? How do we navigate this world in a way that keeps our social and developmental priorities intact, and stop worrying about whether you're allowed to do this under WTO and IMF says you cannot do that and so on and so forth, because they are not bothered about it. And the more we accept all of those constraining rules, the larger the distance between us and the rich economies.
Rice. Africa is a very interesting laboratory for many things, including policies that don't work. Let me just answer the question by limiting myself to my own country's experience. So, Ghana has always been like a lead player in many things on the African continent. First country south of the Sahara to be independent, heavy investment in public services, quite like Sri Lanka, and then focus on food security. Very early stages, investment in energy in order to industrialize. And many similar patterns. So up till the mid-80s, Ghana was self-sufficient. In fact, exported rice and maize. It has surpluses of roots, cassava and yam. As we speak, Ghana spends nearly $1 billion importing rice and maize. And it is only self-sufficient in cassava. Because cassava manure is relatively non-tradable. It's not an export commodity like maize, rice. It's not as internationally competitive like maize and rice. What happened? What happened was that for nearly 20 years, we went through the 17 IMF agreement explains how repeatedly we had to do the same things. And we were told that it was cheaper to save, to import. The international market prices are much cheaper than the cost of producing, which is that import substitution, same kind of argument as manufactured goods. Support for the farm sector, small-scale irrigation, the management of valleys for rice and maize, the marketing boards that supported small farmers and created stocks. Those were the first ones to go. And then, with time, we become totally dependent. Why must you not go down this line of this argument? One, the international food market is not a competitive market. It is dominated by a few agro-business companies. It's basically it's a cartel, and yes, so it's used for what speculative purpose. It's a very speculative. So you may have this large amounts of food, but it doesn't reflect in the international price. No country should subject itself to an uncertain, uncompetitive international food market. That's the first one. Secondly, we learned from COVID as would happen with floods, global warming, wars, such as the Russian war, that no country should leave ability to feed itself totally to the market. People almost starved. As a result, in 2013, the African Union, so the African political coming together is quite interesting. So there's a union. So the African Union took a decision that every country, every year, must devote no less than 10% of its budget to agriculture. And then it doesn't matter what the IMF and everybody says. If you can afford to subsidize and support your family, do it. Because the basic dignity of a people lies in your ability to feed yourself. Because after all, the popular image of an African is an hungry one, right? Nobody wants the popular image of a Sri Lankan to be a hungry and miserable one. It's the reason why you must not listen to this. And in any case, agricultural productivity increases also depends on experience, new technology, different ways of organizing farms. And as the market changes, the competitiveness environment also changes. So don't listen to them. Grow your rice.